Hello, hi, come on in, please. Welcome, come and sit around in a circle. I've got loads of stories again to tell you this week. This week we're going to be talking about why. When things go wrong, once we've got over the initial shock or flight or fright response, and we've had a bit of time to sort of take stock, we always ask why. Why did that have to happen? What was the purpose of that? This is something which I have had a long history of asking, why did this all have to happen? And like finding the meaning and the purpose behind what happened to my brother Christian, and also to myself and us together. So I'd really like to show you how this search for meaning and the answer to the big question of why, how this played out over the course of, it's probably about 5 years now. But to show you, I'm going to have to really start with Christian right at the beginning, where he was writing to an agent, a literary agent, and he was describing his project. And I'd really like you to see, I'll try and condense it a bit, but I want you to see what was driving Christian at this point. And I guess we have to ask, when you're asking the question why, is it fate or is it destiny? Now, fate to me is, I was asking my friend and colleague Natasha, who you'll meet in a couple of programs. I was asking her what she thought about fate and destiny, the sort of differences. And I just want to tell you what she said, because it was quite, it sort of triggered me and as an aha moment. She said to her, the feeling of fate felt like heavy, like it's something that is going to happen and you're just sort of trotting along, being pulled along. Destiny, on the other hand, is something that's light and it sparkles and you're like really excited and off you go. So when I read you this, you'll understand that why I think, well, initially thought that this was all Christian's destiny, going to Africa. So he's writing to a very well-known London literary agent, and he when he introduces it, he starts talking about his aims. So this is Christian speaking, and this was written in September 2002. So he was 27 at the time. So, my plan is to trace the route of the British explorer Mungo Park, whose mission it was in 1795 to discover the course and termination of the River Niger in West Africa. With the bicentenary of his death soon approaching, I thought it would be a fitting tribute to his memory to recreate this amazing journey in post-colonial Africa. I want the real gritty realities and challenges of traveling in these environments to become apparent from my writing and filming. Like Park, I shall travel alone and on foot, save for the accompaniment of local guides and the use of a pirogue, which is a dugout canoes, along some sections of the river. It may be difficult to follow Park's exact route to the river due to changes in names or places that have vanished, but I hope to experience what it was like for him to explore new, unfamiliar lands, often in very difficult conditions. Those conditions, he doesn't put them in, but I'm going to add them in, like disease, malaria, hostile tribes, dangerous animals, inhospitable terrain, and extremes of harsh climate. Christian then carries on, it will be interesting to find out how the ease of travel has improved since he strode into the history books. And then he goes on to talk about the journey, which I'm going to praise. It begins in Gambia, right on the west coast, and it passes through Senegal, into Mali, past the ancient city of Timbuktu to the edge of the Sahara Desert, down through Niger and out through the forests and mangroves surrounding down into Nigeria. The route covers a distance of 2,100 miles and passes through the territories of at least 8 different tribes. I would expect to take about 5 to 8 months to complete the journey, to allow time to visit the major sites, to experience the lives and cultures of these people, and to spend some time looking at the country and the wildlife that lives there. And then he goes on to break down the journey, and his first part of the journey was overland from Gambia to Bamako in Mali, which is from the coast into the Sahel, which is sort of grasslands, and then onto the Niger, onto the river. He never got past his stage 1 of the trip. But then he goes on to talk about his experience and interests, and this is where I think we can start to see how this trip to Africa and what unfolds has been like his destiny for a long, long time. All the traveling that he's done, and but you'll see. So my experience and interest. I was initially attracted to the stories of Mungo Park's adventures as a result of some of my own experiences traveling. And once I'd learnt more about his travels, I found the idea of undertaking such a challenging journey irresistible. I am roughly the same age as Park was when he set out on his first journey. I'm 27, he was 24. Like him, I went to Edinburgh University. I too went abroad after finishing my studies and was also interested in wildlife. I went to the West Indies and spent about 2 years traveling around, exploring the islands of the Eastern Caribbean, where I was researching the fauna and taking photographs with a view to writing about my findings, which I have subsequently done. During this trip, I spent most of my time in the bush and living with the islanders, who were genuinely surprised to see me on my own, away from either the hotels or the island's yachting centres. I met some fascinating people and frequently found myself amongst Rastafarians, who some of them I found were very interested in discussing their African roots and how the white men had taken their people into captivity. Many of these people's ancestors would have come from Western Africa in the regions visited by Park, but most know little about from where their ancestors came from. I didn't give the idea of following up this much interest at the time, as I was in the Caribbean to study the wildlife, but I had already travelled in Southern Africa before and had already decided that I'd love to see more of the continent. My discovery of Mungo Park's travels instantly struck a chord with me, and I thought this would be a great way of combining my interests in exploration, wildlife, and the people that some of my friends in the Caribbean may have descended from. I'm an experienced and capable solo traveller with several past expeditions under my belt, which has given me an ample taste of the hardships encountered when travelling in wild or remote places. It takes a lot to dampen my spirits, and I enjoy roughing it in the course of achieving my goals, particularly when the experiences to be gained by doing so are out of the ordinary. The history behind the exploration of the Niger, which is the third longest river in Africa, is fascinating, but would not be the main focus of the journey, rather a foundation for the work I hope to produce. While documenting my journey on film and in a book, I intend to spend time looking at West Africa, its history, the people, their cultures, trade, industry, and the wildlife, about all of which I have gained a broad knowledge in the course of my research. I hope, therefore, to include something to suit many different tastes. Although this is an exceptionally beautiful part of the world, its beauty masks the harshness of the lives of those who live there. Therefore, I intend to render a realistic portrait of their lives as unseen by the outside world, and to tell a great story in the process. Obviously, he did go on to tell a great story in the process, but that wasn't the story he was expecting to tell at all. So that's kind of Christian's build up to this trip to Africa. The build up to my part in this really happened when in 2015, so we're now talking sort of 12 years after he'd gone missing, I've talked about it before, but I totally couldn't deal with my grief, and we were still living in a kind of hope that he might one day turn up. But I'd gone on to have family. got myself sort of settled in life. And I met our local vicar at the time, a lady vicar in our local shop, and she started to tell me about her brother who just died in New Zealand. So she was over here, he died in New Zealand, and she was telling me about her how she'd been able to be at the funeral through the internet, which was quite new then. It's quite a new idea, which is funny now, because that's mainly how we've been able to view funerals during our lockdowns. But she then went on to talk about how it had been lovely to hear her brother's stories, things that she didn't know about him. So she was obviously listening to eulogies and readings, and as she was talking, I burst into tears. And she knew about Christian, but I hadn't talked to anybody about Christian. Nobody really knew about Christian at that point. And like, she comforted me, and it just hit me that I hadn't dealt with this at all. And that what I really wanted from that conversation, what I really wanted to do was to gather stories of Christian, to piece together his life, the stories that we'd missed. And we, at that point, were thinking we'd never be able to ask him to fill in the gaps. And I know last week we were with Sarah, Christian's one of his best friends, and she was filling some of the gaps about his time in Edinburgh where he was studying. But that conversation with our vicar started off my thought that I needed to ask all his friends for stories of Christian that I wanted to put into a book. And I was going to approach publishers, because I'm a published author already, but I was going to create a book proposal to tell Christian's story and to include, memories of him, but also the search that we had. And yeah, that was my sort of story proposal idea at that time. But we kind of moved on, because when we got to 2018, when Christian and myself found out that he was actually dead, that kind of the focus of why this had happened changed. So initially I was thinking, well, there has to be a reason for him going missing. There has to be a reason for me starting to feel that I need to find him again after all that time, and to start following this pathway really of a spiritual awakening. And I was actually reading this book today. It's a brilliant book, Sand Talk. And in it, there's a brilliant line. Ghosts tend to linger where there is unfinished business and hard truths buried in shallow graves. And obviously, when we found out that Christian was dead, there was obviously a huge story to tell. And that then led to, so when I found out what had happened to Christian, I think by this time, so I'm going to jump again to July 2018. So actually I hadn't found out his whole story at that point, but we knew what had happened to him. And I started to think that actually this was a much bigger story than Christian and myself, and this was being expanded out to other people. It was like our experiences would help other people. So we'd gone from just sort of sibling interaction to actually thinking, hang on, this is on a much bigger scale than we think. And I'd actually wrote down my fears that the story that we've been through, the 15 years, I don't want them to be wasted. How do we get this story that we're telling and the lessons that we've both learned, because Christian and I learned a lot of lessons along the way, how do we get that out to a wider audience? And I was asking my guides at that point, and Christian, like, show me how I'm going to do this. Show me how I'm going to get to a bigger audience. And a lot of this was to do with like finding balance again, because obviously when something happens that completely knocks your life out of alignment, all you want to do is to get balance again and try and get through the days is a good start, but also to have the hope and the faith that at some point life is going to be more peaceful, is going to feel calmer. And that is all to do with how you're feeling inside. So whatever's happening on the outside of life, and however you're being pushed and pulled and circumstances are happening around you, you can see it as fate. These things are happening to me, whereas actually seeing it as things are happening for me. And Christian's advice at that point, when I was saying, look, how do we get this bigger story? How do I find some peace that our story isn't going to be wasted and that people are actually going to be able to get something from it as well? He started talking about God, and he was talking about feelings and how feelings are God-given. So if whatever you're feeling, it's almost like God is giving them to you to show you how out of balance you are, or how in balance you are. So we're always trying to get back to a balance. And I used the image of the blue triangle for the image for this show, and that's really getting back to that balance and that calmness and that peace. And that was what I'm going to show you, what Christian and I and all of us are all trying to do in this life. So yeah, I just sort of had to tell you about that first. And finding your balance is like a real purpose in life. And when things are really unclear, for example, I asked the question at the end of the last program, which was, why was Christian not found earlier on? Why was the truth about Christian not found earlier on? There were so many searches for Christian, and we had absolutely nothing, no concrete evidence at all, no news at all. So when I started doing my sessions with Christian, we did trance mediumship sessions to really find out exactly what had happened to him. I asked him why it had taken so long to find him, for number one, and why it had been me that had to find him, because at that point it became really obvious that it was a journey that Christian and I were doing together. It wasn't just him going off and me going off on our separate ways in life. We had come back to sort of parallel. And Christian said, and this also kind of gave you'll hear it, but it gives an idea of the purpose behind him going missing and everything that was going on. But it also again shows this idea of a destiny. So yes, so there were lots of searches for me, I'm now told, but why was I never found? So this is Christian speaking through me. And he says, the honest truth is that it would have served no great purpose for me to be found then, dead. I would have just been a dead brother, a dead son, a dead friend. Everyone would have grieved in their own way and then moved on with their life as best they could. But that was never the purpose of my death or my story towards my death. The purpose was for Hannah to move through life, to have her family, to experience being a writer, to experience speaking in public. All these things she's done over the years. It's all Hannah. And thank God she took every opportunity she was given, never shied away from opportunities and doing. All the people she met along the way to help her were all there for this purpose. She doesn't know how special she is. She healed and regenerated herself from loss using all the guidance around her. And now we are in the position to use everything that Hannah's learnt to be able to bring my purpose, to be able to bring purpose to my death and missing status for 15 years. Hannah understands this now, but she's resented it for many years. We've had to, no, not we, as I've played no part knowingly, but others in spirit have been leading her. In many cases, using other people to keep her in a state of hope, to bring her to the point where this purpose is now being able to be fulfilled. The past is quite a murky place for me in the physical, but Hannah's going to help me to tell my story and shed light on what has happened by telling you my story and hers. Hannah is going to provide healing through story. This will be in writing, film, speaking, story as therapy. She's going to have a film crew, which I never had, stupidly. So at this point in time, I still don't know what the film crew is all about. And unless it's doing these podcasts and these films, I don't know. But when I did those films with him, it was like, it's all been about the story. And he says, actually here, he says, you know, if he had known about what was going to happen to him, he would have never have gone on this trip, even though people told him that, all, you know, this was a bad idea. He was like, no, I'm going to do it. But he says it was never the plan for him to stay at home and rot. The plan was for me to always be traveling, to always be exploring, to always be building a story for Hannah and myself to tell later. It's all been about the story, which Hannah's going to uncover and tell. So, and then he carries on saying, my hope is that all those who need support through loss, however long ago it was, find some peace through these videos and through Hannah's words and our words. I don't think I need to say any more there, but I mean, and he says, sorry, I was always chasing after something, the answers. But as Hannah will tell you, the more you chase after something and try to force things to happen, the more they elude you. It's only when you accept, release emotions and forgive and become a lighthouse with love in your heart, that's when life begins. And he was telling me all this. Well, he was telling me this and I was telling the audience. And when I was in this, when I do like the trance mediumship, I don't know, or I don't consciously register what's being said. So I did these films, or they're all on YouTube, and I had no understanding of what I was saying or what I was saying. So when I read those back, I was like, oh, okay, this is a much bigger purpose and a much bigger like event than I could possibly comprehend, really. It had gone from just, but yeah, as I said, just from Christian and I to these films where we were going to be doing you know, helping other people and on a much bigger scale. So it was all a bit of a shock. But then it kind of became obvious as time went on, and I did my own work on sort of meditating and trying to understand what on earth was going on. And I did a meditation which was, it's called the Council of Light. Now this Council of Light is like a set of spirits who you, before you birth into this life, stay with me. I know it might sound a bit out there, but stay with me. Before you come into your life, you have, to a certain degree, decided on lots of things that are going to happen to you in this life. And I did this meditation, and I'm going to share with you some of the things that came up. And I also want to include another few things about destiny life and also about the parents that you choose. So I did this meditation, and it became really obvious. Christian and I were together before we birthed. We're only 14 months apart in age, so we birthed pretty quickly together. So I was with Christian in this sort of Council of Lights area before we birthed, and Christian was very excited. He was holding my hand, and I was not keen. I was not keen to do this life at all. And he was adamant that we needed to do this life. We'd chosen our parents already. And I will tell you what this is something later that he told me, but I will tell you what he said about our parents. So like our parents, they might not totally understand what's happening to you, but they understand. They allow you to evolve. They understand that you need to break and rebuild yourself. They shouldn't be scared of what you become. True love allows understanding, forgiveness, and finds a way. We're very lucky with our parents, Han, and we always do this when we talk about them. Sorry. We're very lucky with our parents, Han. I now know why we chose them, as they've allowed us to find our own path in life. They haven't constrained, despite everything in them shouting and screaming that we are taking the wrong path. The ripples we're creating now are calming them and making them proud. We do owe them everything, you know. Yeah, so that's where we chose our parents. But also we chose like the circumstances that we were born in. So we were born into England, safe and green, as Christian said, and we had schooling, good schooling. Christian was a boarder, so he went away boarding, and the whole point of this life was that Christian and I would be separated, and I knew that. We both knew that coming in, but in the circumstances that we lived in, the separation was quite an easy one in terms of boarding school and that sort of gradual separation. So we grew up on a farm together for, you know, many years, and then gradually got separated. And that was the only thing that kind of made me okay with this life in terms of losing Christian, because I knew I would lose him. And I knew that we would find each other again. I didn't know how or when or in what circumstances, but I knew we would be reunited. And I also knew that it would be a safe time in this time, you know, we were born in the 1970s, but, you know, forward from that, it was a safe time to be able to talk about these kind of things. And yeah, I chose the body that I'm in. We chose all these things. And the other thing that we wanted to heal, there was a pattern that we wanted to heal. But it wasn't so much a pattern of Christian and I in our healing, although, as I've shown you in previous podcast episodes, there's been lots of ancestral healing and things that we've had to do. But this mission, it was like a mission on earth. Christian was like, well, it is a mission. It's like down to universal healing. It wasn't just about us, it was going to be a universal healing. And also that when the other thing that kind of persuaded me to do this was that when Christian had gone, I would also be given a very loving family to replace Christian. So I would feel fully loved, which I do in my family that I have. So there were all these things, and this was all in meditation. And it was really obvious how, I just didn't want to do this. I was really reluctant to do this. because Christian and I have had many past lives together, not necessarily as siblings, but as allies. And it had been hard in previous lives because we'd also been separated, but we hadn't been able to tell our story. We'd always been, and myself particularly, had been sort of cut down many times for the truths that I spoke in previous lives. So I was really unsure. Christian was the strong one, and he was like, come on, Han, we've got to go and do this. Like, this will be the last one. This will be the last one. And he persuaded me. And I mean, I don't know if you can tell, I mean, Christian is a strong character. And yeah, so I kind of agreed to do this life. But it had to be like a collective. It had to be Christian and I doing this together. And the mission was really to heal the grief in the world. It's like healing grief and fear, to turn the fear to love, to lighten people on earth, to bring love connections, to show that loss is an illusion, love is all you need. The way to live is like how animals live, so wild and natural, in terms of mind, I should say. And like I was also shown, that was when I was shown this triangle, and how balance is so important, and how rebirth is important. So like when these awful things happen, or where you're forced to change, where you're forced to accept the unknown, like that is when it is your opportunity to rebirth. And we'll get onto that a little bit later. But this meditation was so real. I was seeing so there were lots of other people around us in this area. So if you're listening to this and you're like, when I'm talking about the Council of Lights, and some people would call it the Ring of Destiny, I think. So this area before you birth, where you get your sort of mission, but then when you're born, you sort of get this collective amnesia. And life is all about finding that balance again, and going through all the lessons. And actually Christian says something here. We did actually say that I did say that I would do this mission, but I also said to Christian that the onus was on him to provide like the truth and the messages and the lessons, and that he was going to be kind of the leader in this life, and that he would be the one doing the storytelling. So he would go and get the story and I would be the one to tell it. I don't think when we talk about fate and destiny and all that, all of this, we really have to remember that we have free will. We have free will all the time. We have a choice. So if something comes up and you think, oh, this feels familiar, like this feels like I have a decision to make here. I can either go this way with my heart, maybe, or this way with my head. This is the way I should be going. Like, that's where you have your choice. That's where the free will comes in. So you can have, an unlimited number of ways your life can turn out, but really the balance that we all want and we're all aiming for is to follow these God-given feelings and actually try and balance what is my heart really wanting me to do, and having the bravery to do what your heart really wants to do. There's something here actually. So when I was doing a memoir with somebody not that long ago, because I used to ghostwrite memoirs with people, and this gentleman had a story about his upbringing that he never told his family. He didn't tell them about his early life because it was so completely different to where he was, and I think he was a bit embarrassed about it, but he wanted to put the story down and tell his truth. And I said to this gentleman, like, this memoir, it has to be your essence. It has to be really who you are, and you know what you carry in your heart. This has to be in your memoir. So he did tell me all about his parents and how he grew up, and we put it in this memoir for his family to read. But when I came home from that, I was talking talking about this with talking about it with Christian. And he said that we are all made up of our experiences. We choose them and choose them before we're birthed. And we have to live and experience life to expose ourselves to our potential lessons. It's up to us whether we firstly engage with the potential lessons, and whether B, we live them, and C, whether we allow ourselves to learn from that situation. We can fall at any of the hurdles. So like living your destiny life, and Christian will say, you know, you follow your dreams, but don't expect it to be an easy path because when you're stretched, when you're challenged, like that's when the good stuff can really happen. But it's not easy. I mean, none of this path that Christian and I have been on, and which we would encourage others to do, you know, if you have a death or a loss or a grief that you can't shake, you know, really doing that inner work and really exploring it and releasing the feelings, and like going on the journey, doing that walk through the grief. We call it a grief walk. So actually walking through the grief and really releasing everything. That is what we that's what we help other people with, and that's what we recommend. You know, that we are an example of how grief can be, I was going to say, overcome, used, you know, how grief can really be used to grow and expand, and to see life in a different way. We have this image of Christian and I have used to, in our meditations, used to fly as eagles, and when you're in your eagle form, like you're high up, you can see everything from a much higher perspective, and you can see a longer perspective as well. So I think what we're talking about here is all through our journey, is the long view of it. You know, when you're living in a situation and you're very insular and everything is getting on top of you, it's very easy to not be able to take the long view and just struggle and strive and fight. But actually, when you're up high, you get a soul view of your life, really. So your higher self, what you've come here to achieve, you can kind of go, oh yeah, okay, if I look at it from a higher view, this has happened because of this. You know, I'm here to learn from this. I'm here to break that pattern. I'm here to, you know, be the hope of my ancestors, that I will be able to break this pattern of behavior, maybe, or I need to be able to forgive, and that will change my life and my family's life from now on. You know, all these things. It's taking what, you know, that destiny, or, you know, that light feeling. How will this make me light? How will this make me lighter? How will this change me in a positive way? Sorry, I went off on one there. Christian was obviously going off. The other thing that I needed to talk about was Christian then told me a couple of extra things which made more sense to his kind of side of the story. And I'd just like to share these with you because they might trigger something for you. They might just trigger something about experiences that you've had, and also the idea that we're never alone, and you know, we come into this life with a purpose, and it will be unique for everybody, but we have a whole heap of guides around us, and we only have to ask for their help if we're feeling stuck. Anyway, Christian, he's already talked about angels when he was growing up, how he had angels around him. And Christian, so this is Christian speaking. This is after I've found his story, after we've done our storytelling. We did live, but there's an extra bit to this at the end. So when I was traveling through Africa alone, I had several strange experiences which changed me forever. Little did I know my earthly life was nearly at an end. The first experience was a visitation by an angel. It was neither male or female, and androgynous, I suppose. It was definitely in the human form, though, pale-skinned and totally foreign-looking amongst the Africans I was usually around. It became, after the first visitation, a regular visitor in my eyes. It really did appear to me like a living and breathing human. It came to me in moments of quiet and peaceful contemplation, usually when I had finished scrawling, like his handwriting, his notes, and it would appear to sit down beside me equally at peace. Africa, I thought, was playing tricks on my mind. Traveling alone frequently does this to people. But this was no figment of my imagination. At first, I was taken aback and wondered what I should do and say in its presence. It had this beauty, silent and serene. I wonder if it's rude for me to be using the term it. The apparition never said anything on the first few visits. We just sat contemplating the enormity of the landscapes in our view. It never touched me physically, ever, but I felt an intense energy radiating from it. It was dressed in a white robe, sparkling clean even in the dust, and I always felt grubby and embarrassed by my appearance. But I knew I wasn't being judged. I could tell its hairstyle, short and closely cropped, was blonde, natural. Blue piercing eyes like lasers almost. The eyes, could see straight through me and into me. There was no denying the internal power energy within this form. Despite its obvious power, it radiated peace and contentment. It would come at all times of the day, no set pattern, and I didn't believe I summoned it in any way, but later it revealed to me how and why I'd called it to me. This is the latter part of this letter, which I will skip to. Going back to Africa, I was nervous of these angels at first because they were adults, fully grown. I had previously only sat with children and juveniles. These fully grown angels had no wings, unlike the ones you interact with. They are all-knowing, very zen. I didn't know what I was supposed to do around them, but as with the children, I would just sit and gain energy and comfort. I can't tell you if they were the same one each time, but I suspect, like the children, they were different. But as adults, they had lost some of their individuality. What did these angels want from me? At the time, I had no idea. I just liked their presence. I was traveling alone, so I had no one else to really relax and chill with. One incident gave me my first inkling of what I should do with them, for them. I was to become a storyteller. So this is almost like Christian remembering what he was here for. He wasn't here. He was here to get a story, but by being the explorer and to create a story which would touch hearts and minds of people. So it would make it easy. We could tell this story and people would, they wouldn't necessarily know they were receiving messages and guidance. You could just listen to the story. So he's saying, by being a storyteller, as you know, it's all about giving a voice to universal truths and themes. Fables, myths, and legends all tell truths in story, which is easy to pass on. Lessons learnt are passed on. One day or evening, I was sitting under this tree, shaded and actually full, so he'd had a full meal, and I must have fallen asleep. Unusually, the angel appeared and spoke with me. The voice was totally hypnotic, like warm treacle flowing over a sponge pudding. Public school desserts there. I'll try and remember exactly what was said. And then, so this was when he was in Africa traveling. So we were kind of time hopping. Christian, it said, your time on earth is running short. Your life has been one of searching, running and breathing to be free, to have that angelic energy that you've been introduced to make a difference in this world, in the physical, that you create in your dreams. With your background in zoology, we've given you opportunities to do with the animals, but that's never fulfilled you as you thought. All the opportunities we've presented have appeared to fail. We've been waiting for this moment, this perfect moment, to give you your real purpose in this life. All is ready for you now. You do not need to be scared. You do not need to be wary of what will unfold. Your sister, Hannah, is coming to you to help you. She will take over my role. She will speak to you, unlike me. Grandmother and Edward, neither known to you, will appear to you too. Now, Edward, if you've been listening to the podcast, is Ursula's father from podcast 2 and 3. They are in spirit. They have already made contact. Yeah, so he says, like, Christian was basically saying that before, as he was going towards his death, he was being told what was going on. And I would really love to have a death doula on the show with me. So if there's anyone out there who's listening who'd like to come on, but I know that so many interesting things happened before death occurs. And Christian obviously had these visitations, and he was being told what was going to be happening to him. And he then later says that angels are God's messengers. They don't all have the same purpose, guises, or ways of doing things, but you can always tell when your life has been touched by them. Yeah, and again, that's that sort of that destiny calling, that idea that we're being taken, and you're following what lights you up, what excites you. Keep following in that vein, and like take the small steps, like live in the present and just take those small steps. If something's calling for you, like you'll be pulled. Like Christian and I have been pulled all the way through our lives. Actually, literally being pulled forwards to this point. We are all, if we allow ourselves to be pulled, but we do have this choice. We can say, no, you're right. But you will keep feeling uncomfortable. When you're feeling uncomfortable and when you're feeling nervous about things, like that's when you're getting the call to go where you're wanting to go. It's uncomfortable, but often that's where the really good stuff is happening, and when you're going to learn stuff. And then there's just one little bit as well I want to add. So this was later on, this was Christian's like last little bit of extra information for the book. He's always talking about a book. So I think these podcasts have actually been the book. I've been writing it as I've been speaking it. So this was the last little bit that he wrote about why he was traveling, why he was always drawn to traveling. And as often happened, I was actually reading a book, and I burst into tears when I was reading a section. This is the book. It's The Songlines by Bruce Chatwin. And Bruce studied nomads, and he traveled all over the world with nomads. And this is The Songlines is all about the the Australian Aboriginal songlines. And in it, I was literally in the middle of Kidzania, which is like this weird thing for children where they basically go out and try different jobs. So it's like this whole town, and they have set areas where children can go and do different jobs, like vet or radio or sportsman or something like that, which is totally commercialized and totally totally what Christian was actually trying to get away from, which will become clear. But yeah, in the middle of this place, I was reading this book, and there was a mention of walking, how it gets you closer to God, it gets you closer to balance, to peace. And there's apparently in this book there's a Latin term. I'm not even going to pronounce the Latin, but it translates as "it is solved by walking," which I think we actually mentioned in the first podcast. So Christian, as I've told you from that first agent's letter, he was always traveling. He was like the wild man. I'm sure you've seen the pictures. That's what he wanted to do with his life. He was drawn to walk. And this is Christian's last piece to me about, yeah, kind of like tying up the ends. So we wrote this in, let me just see, in May 2019. And he says, travel. Han, this is an important point for the book. And that's why I gave you the tears yesterday while reading Chatwin's book. I'd really like to say a few words about why I traveled and what I experienced while traveling. In one word, freedom. I was able to be myself, undistracted from being don't know what that says, from being my true self. I could be bolshy, kind, generous, sociable, quiet, and wander freely. There was no demands placed on me except my own thoughts, which were sometimes skewed by drugs or alcohol. That was in the UK. But generally I could be myself, which was such a relief. Dusty boots and wind in my hair or heat on my back, flies around me, a natural diet and fresh air unpolluted by traffic. I had space to wander and explore. And that idea of the rhythm of walking being hypnotic and meditative was so true for me. I could really see myself and the universe around me. Even in Africa, before the angels, I was beginning to view myself and my place in new terms. The snake shedding her skin was an apt metaphor. It's like seeing things with new eyes. Corny, I know, but true. I was being stripped back to my bones. Who was I? What was I doing here? What was I contributing? What was I doing with this life? Who was I living for? Myself or others? What was the extent of myself? Where did I begin and end? Heavy questions. But like you, Han, when you were told to know yourself, that's how you awaken. You, as me, a starseed, know now that this life has all been about the journey we've been on, the wanderers, the journeyers. We've come full circle, lost and found, lost and awakened, sleeping and alive. Truth kicks you into life. That's a good phrase. Being alive is feeling the wind on your face, the sensation of an energy greater than yourself enveloping you, sensing the mystery of everything around you, the potential that exists to tap into. You can be part of that energy. Tap into it like plugging in a socket to connect to that energy. Of course, the potential to connect is always there. But what do people do with it normally? They might sense it, but they do nothing or don't get the opportunity to live. Well, that's what they think anyway. Like you at the moment, Han, you're just moments away from flicking the on switch, which will see you connect fully to this energy potential. You're actually a bit scared still as you toy with others' expectations and reactions. Honestly, you can flick that switch. Can you feel the angels in your back? Yeah, okay. You just need to have self-belief and the ability to just connect and not think about the repercussions of what you'll unleash. Just travel the path, wander freely, converse, interact, create, be led willingly. I was, and I'm very glad I was. So yeah, that's Christian's kind of final few words on the book. And actually it feels quite, we have actually come up to time almost. Yeah, I like the story is the purpose. Like Christian is the storyteller and I'm like the spirit messenger, I guess, for this. We have one part of this story which we haven't finally tied up yet. And this is the camera cards that I've been talking about on and off throughout this. Like the onus is on Christian in this life to provide the proof of this story and also to make it like a much bigger audience for this story. So these camera cards, I don't know if I've really explained them before, but they were stolen from him in Kita in Mali, Kita. And I have always been told by God, by source, and by Christian all along that these will be back in my possession. And with these camera cards, camera reels. So there'll be a film of Christian plus his photographs. We will be able to like complete this story, to be able to have a seemingly impossible to complete story. You know, when you have a missing person in Africa that nobody's ever going to, you know, find the story. You know, we have got so far that we have been able to find peace, balance, rebirth, both of us, and to help other people. Like these camera cards are like the last piece of that puzzle. And I assume that by the end of these podcasts, because we've done 8 and we've still got another 16, I think, to do, we will have these camera cards. So the intention is here. I will use whatever I receive, I will use and publicize. And this will be like the story. This will be how we will be able to really fulfill our purpose. So there we go. I've set out the intention, and I am calling the camera cards in. I am calling the last missing pieces to this story, to our story, in. There we go. So lots of love, and I'll see you next week. I think next week I'm going to do a bit of a roundup, and I know there's quite a bit of agitation about moving out and getting back into real life after this COVID lockdown. So I think we're going to be helping with that. Okay. I hope you enjoyed this episode and got something from it. Okay. Lots of love, and I'll see you next week. Bye. Thank you for listening to The Finder of Lost Things. I think we've been triggered so long and so hard by COVID, and it's going to carry on. People are getting used to stillness, and they're getting used to more solitude. But how do you use that time for the highest good? This process that we're going to explore will bring back the joy and purpose to life. That wholeness, you know, that sort of harmony and flow and togetherness. People are really ready to find their lost parts now. You can find me at hannahvelton.online.